Hello, everyone. Let's jump right in. What happened in Chicago this week? Well, in economics and development news, first, and welcome economic news, American Airlines announced that it will run more than 20% more flights out of O'Hare this year than last. Last week, we'd heard the whispers of United Airlines potentially moving its headquarters to Denver. So that was not great news. That was just a rumor. And this week, JB Pritzker publicly thanked United for everything they've done for the state, which is a very transparent attempt to get them to stay. So this American Airlines news was good. City Council approved what's called the 1901 project. It's a $7 billion plan to redevelop the empty parking lots around the United Center. It's now just got to get through one more layer of approvals from the city to move forward. And given that the owners, the Bulls and the Blackhawks, are actually funding its first phase and they have their own cash to pull from, it seems like this one might actually kick off later this year. But color me skeptical, given the fate of other mega projects like Lincoln Yards, which is just sitting there after about 8 years. And even the most optimistic completion date for this 1901 project from the developers is 2040. Yep, 40, not 30. So it's going to be a while regardless. The City Council also approved a $14 million in funding for a mixed income development in the Cabrini Green area of River North. This is a small project, but it's noteworthy because it's the start of a much larger redevelopment of the Cabrini Green area in River North, which a few decades ago had many more public housing units and projects before they were infamously ripped down with a promise to redevelop, which hasn't happened. I think it's been like 30 years or something like that. The area has sat mostly vacant since then, and the city's only just now starting to make good on that promise of replacing the public housing units that were ripped down. So that's good to see. A foreclosure lawsuit made clear this week that the AMA Plaza building, the big black tall building right on the river next to Trump Tower, which has prime riverfront real estate. The lawsuit made it clear that it has lost 62% of its value, the building, since just 2022, so in less than 3 years, which is just more proof that the commercial real estate market in Chicago likely still hasn't hit bottom post-pandemic, unless you think that, what do I care about some big office building tower. This is actually pretty important because when the value of commercial real estate goes down significantly, so does the amount of taxes that the city can collect from commercial real estate through a commercial real estate tax, because the tax is just a function of the value of the real estate. And so when the amount of that tax goes down that the city can collect, the city budget stays the same or increases, which it does every year, then the amount of tax that the city has to get and collect from other things has to increase by the same amount or more. So you see that up elsewhere. So not great news. Hopefully we will soon reach bottom and bounce back. And then lastly, in economics and development, the Chicago Plan Commission adopted the big new upzoning plan that I mentioned a handful of weeks ago for Edgewater and Uptown, which basically will allow a lot more things to be built in that area. So the area should see more development and density in the next handful of years. All right, moving on into politics, education, and transportation. I mentioned last week that the mayor's $830 million bond proposal or pile of debt had moved forward. I was mistaken. It was this week that the city council was going to vote on whether or not they wanted to take up that proposal. They voted yes. So next week will be the actual vote. This has become extremely contentious. Remember that back when the mayor proposed the first time, it was the day after the city's debt got downgraded, which was kind of a black eye for the city. And now that it's coming closer to actually being voted on, a light is being shined on the actual structure of the bond, which is highly unusual. It has the city not paying any principal, only paying interest for a couple of years, in a pretty transparent attempt to keep the cost of the debt down for the next couple of years until after the next mayoral election. So that was a big fight this week. The mayor also reignited the fight this week over the $175 million CTU pension payment. That was what kickstarted the whole fight that caused the CPS board to resign in protest of the mayor trying to float a bond payment in order to pay for that pension payment, that $175 million pension payment. So the mayor kind of lost that fight back in December when the whole board resigned, and it seems like he's now taking it up again and he's pushing for it again. It's pretty complicated because the city doesn't want to pay for that pension. It wants CPS to pay. CPS does not want to pay. And so the mayor's going to need an amendment, basically. The CPS board is going to have to vote for an amendment to allow CPS to issue the debt in order to make the pension payment, the $175 million pension payment. So he's going to need 2/3 majority of the CPS board. We'll see if he gets that soon. But the subtext to all of this too is that the mayor explicitly campaigned against doing exactly this when he was running for mayor. So people are pointing to that as well. In CPS CTU contract negotiation land, not much movement here this past week, but Stacey Gates, the head of the CTU, does appear to have a new competitor for her job. A woman named Erica Meza announced she's running a campaign of quote unquote repairing the relationship between the CTU and the people of Chicago. So that will probably hurt CTU's leverage in the short term. Mayor Johnson also finally appointed his 11th and final appointee to the CPS school board this week. J.B. Pritzker introduced his state budget. You probably saw on social media his speech surrounding that budget. He used it as an opportunity to make a speech pushing back on Trump. He clearly has an eye on his national profile. The budget was notable for no major tax increases and restraining spending, which, again, he's probably doing with an eye on his national profile. And really any of the J.B. Mayor Johnson dynamics that we have been seeing and will continue to see should be seen in the context of JB thinking about his national, possibly presidential run profile in the next couple of years. He also banned or proposed banning cell phones in schools, something that's been kind of a national movement recently, so that will likely and hopefully go through soon. The proposal to lower the speed limit on Chicago City streets from 30 to 25 miles per hour that I'd mentioned before was put to a vote this week and was rejected. It was a pretty close vote, so we could see it go through at some point in the future. Interestingly, most progressive members of the city council voted for it, whereas most members of the Black Caucus specifically voted against it. It seems like they may think that the burden of the fines may fall hardest on people living in majority Black areas, which is probably both true and false. Anything that is fine-based like this is inherently quote-unquote regressive, a regressive tax measure essentially, because fines are fixed dollar amount, which means they're a higher percent of a lower income person's income. And so it's, the burden falls harder on someone who's poor. And so, though of course a speed camera can't possibly be racist, if a disproportionately high percent of poor people in the city are people of color, which they are, then by definition, anything that is regressive in nature, like a fine, will hit them harder. So Alderman LaSpada, who sponsored the bill, will probably have to win the Black Caucus over before we start seeing lower speed limits, which I personally would love to see because it makes streets quieter and safer to bike on. That 5 mile per hour speed difference is actually huge in reducing your chances of dying if you are hit by a car at that speed, because for whatever reason, the probability of dying is exponential. It's not linear. So 25 miles per hour and below, you're basically guaranteed to live if you get hit, whereas 30 miles per hour, you have a pretty decent chance of dying. Mayor Johnson condemned a proposal from Chicago's top ethics watchdog, the Office of the Inspector General, which released a report saying that his administration was intentionally holding up ethics investigations that might embarrass the administration, which probably every single mayor's administration does, but the OIG recommended that the city council change the city law so that the mayor's administration couldn't do that anymore. And one alderman did introduce a proposed new law to do that. And when he did, another alderman, the one that, if you remember from last week, was kicked out of city council, Byron Sigcho Lopez, after just losing his shit. He's the mayor's basically chief ally on the council. That alderman blocked this proposed law for the mayor, basically. He did it on behalf of the mayor, and the mayor then ripped the law, which is just head-scratching political instincts, because he earned himself headlines like Mayor Johnson rips ethics reform. Like, just confusing. Nearly 8 months after that same inspector, or a different inspector general, recommended that a task force be formed to figure out how to rid the Chicago Police Department of officers who have ties to extremist groups like the Proud Boys, Mayor Johnson finally announced that he has accepted that recommendation from the inspector general. Didn't make it clear why it took so long to accept the recommendation, which seemed like a no-brainer and in alignment with his administration's goals. The Kennedy Expressway, it turns out that construction delays aren't done yet. There are now problems with the gates that are forcing the closure of the Ontario Street feeder ramp indefinitely. So that's not done yet. In corruption news, there's always corruption news. An Illinois state senator was caught asking for $5,000 in exchange for promising a red light camera executive that he would limit the state's study of competitor traffic systems. A measly $5,000. Just, why would you ruin your life for $5,000? Reminds me of the New York mayor who did ruin his life for some Turkish airline tickets. Just crazy. And then lastly, in the 2027 mayoral race watch, and the Susan Mendoza watch this week, Susanna Mendoza tweeted furiously, truly furiously, a bunch of times, against the $830 million bond proposal I talked about. And she also tweeted about the cost of affordable housing units, which is a topic that has been kind of growing in controversy over the last handful of months as more projects have come out where the price per unit of constructing a single unit on average has ballooned to almost $1 million per one single apartment unit, which is about, the craziest part is that it's about twice the average that even the most expensive private market units cost to build, even in like Lincoln Park and West Loop, nearly twice. So she was tweeting about that, and she's always given us content, so I appreciate her for that. And that is all I got this week. I will see you next week. Have a nice weekend.